Hello, BookTube. Well, we finally did it. We finally reached the actual Friday reads. After a whole week of name your weekday reads, we finally reached the day when people are supposed to do a video about the books that they're currently reading or planning on reading immediately. And that's what I'm going to do. And once again, I have two sets of books broken up evenly, 4 and 4. I want to show you first 4 books that I have just read, that I have just recently read, and tell you a little bit about them. And I want to start off with a delightful romance. This is the finished mass market copy of The First Earl I See Tonight by Anna Bennett. It's the first volume in her Debutante Diaries series. And I think we saw originally the publisher was very nice to send me an advance copy that was actually in trade paperback size of this. One of the first time that's ever happened to me for a mass market release. And I read about it then, but I want to describe it to you now for you latecomers, sure, stumbling your way in from the back. Let's see here. Recently jilted by his fiancée, David Gray, Earl of Ravenport, is not in the market for a wife. Even if Gray didn't have his hands full renovating his crumbling country house, it would take more than a bold marriage proposal from a headstrong young beauty to thaw his frozen heart. Gray is confident that spending a week at his ramshackle estate will change her mind about marriage, but every passionate moment he spends with her tempts him to change his. A talented artist, Miss Fiona Hartley, desperately needs her dowry money to pay off a blackmailer set on ruining her sister. The handsome Earl seems a sensible choice for a husband, if only she can convince him that romance will play no part in their arrangement. But marrying in name only may prove difficult for Fiona. Gray can't help but be dazzled by her genuine warmth. Yet as their feelings deepen, Fiona's deadline looms. Will her secrets destroy them, or is true love their final destiny? And the back cover copy there, I wouldn't have written it that way. It actually shifts around some of the story's emphases in ways that I think do the story a discredit. This is actually a wonderful novel. That description sounds wonderful too, but it sounds heavy on gimmickry of a type that throws the emphasis on the Earl of Ravenport, when actually the emphasis from start to finish is on Fiona Hartley herself, who starts off the novel vaguely hinting at this villain who has attached his interest to her sister and isn't going to let go until he's paid off. And of course, hovering over that whole plot line in the book is what all of us know, what everybody knows, which is that you don't ever get rid of a blackmailer. You don't ever pay them enough money. There's always some other resolution that has to happen. But the male character, the Earl of Ravenport, his home is crumbling, as we mentioned. His country estate is crumbling, and the woman that originally he thought he was going to marry took one look at the place and decided that the whole arrangement was off. And that is what accounts for him being not so much frozen. That sounds so severe. He's off the idea of finding a convenient wife, and that makes the letter that Fiona sends him at the beginning of the book, that makes the letter all the more difficult for him to stomach. Because if he's worried, as he is at the beginning of this novel, about the pitfalls of finding a wife of convenience, then imagine, I want to read it to you, imagine what he thinks when he gets this letter in the mail from her, this woman that he barely knows. They were at a dance together years ago, and she tripped and fell into the orchestra pit, creating an absolute chaos that caused everyone around them to just stand and stare, except for him. He did the gallant thing. He reached down to help her up. That's it. That's the whole of the connection that these two have ever had. But she's heard that he's short of money, and she has plenty of money, and stands to inherit plenty more. And she writes him this letter at the beginning. She mentions at the beginning of the novel that her finishing school did not cover this. Dear Lord Ravensport, I am writing to you with a proposal that is unconventional but quite sincere. After much deliberation, I've reached the conclusion that each of us would benefit greatly if we were to ally ourselves through marriage. I possess a very large dowry, which I'm certain you would find useful. In addition, I would promise to be a very undemanding wife. Indeed, you would be free, nay, encouraged, to pursue your own interests. All I would ask in return is that you allow me to retain a small property with a cottage in Cornwall, £5,000 of my own use, and a reasonable yearly allowance. The stipulated monies shall be mine to spend as I please without any explanation or interference. I do have one last requirement. We must be wed within a fortnight. I understand that this may seem rash, but since our union would merely be one of convenience, I see no reason to delay. Please consider my proposal and provide your response at the first opportunity. And of course, having had a horrible experience with a shallow young woman who took one look at his crumbling family estate and changed her mind, his answer is no. His response to that letter when they next meet at a ball, his answer is no. And she begs him to reconsider. She begs him to let her make her case for why she wants this arrangement. And he does. And the novel unfolds from there, and it's wonderful. Just wonderful. I confess that the organizing gimmick, the title gimmick about the debutante diaries, she and a couple of friends decide that they will document their social season in diaries, in separate diaries, each one of them. As long as they don't mention proper names, they think that it will be interesting and fun. And I confess that gimmick, the whole conceit of debutante diaries, is the weakest part of a novel that is the first in the debutante diaries series. Maybe it will get more prominent and more used as it goes along. But there were long stretches where I completely forgot about the secondary characters in this book are engaging in the way those of you that know modern or even traditional Regency romances will know. There are always a brace of secondary characters, and part of their point is to set up future romances. The future romances in series like this virtually never happen to strangers. Instead, it's sister after sister, housemate after housemate, schoolmate after schoolmate, whatever it is. Each one of them, we get the story of each one of them. And those secondary characters are clearly setting up stuff like that, but I swear, it was the relationship between these two that had me captivated throughout. As Lord Ravenport says at the beginning, when they're actually, after he's read her proposal and they're having a dance and they're coldly discussing things, he puts it at the beginning that he didn't think he'd ever in his life meet anyone as cynical as he is. and watching that cynicism change and alter over the course of the novel into romance, sure, love, sure, but also friendship. More importantly, friendship. That was wonderful. I highly recommend this. I didn't even check to see when it actually comes out. Probably early November. Oh no, well, early November, October 30th. So October 30th, I think, is a Tuesday. Tuesday, October 30th, Wednesday, October 31st, and then Thursday, the 1st of the month. Is that right? Well, one way or another, you'll see this. When you get to your bookstore, you'll see this. And if you're looking for a very good contemporary Regency romance, look no further. This is wonderful. And then the next two I've also mentioned, I've also described, these are novels, contemporary novels. One is set in the present day, one is historical. The historical is Love is Blind by William Boyd, who has written a ton of novels. And this is another one which I described to you yesterday, but I'll do it briefly again, just to catch you up to speed, because it's possible, theoretically speaking, that you watch other YouTube channels in addition to this one. I don't know why you would do that, but you might. So let's see here. The plot here is Brodie Moncur is a brilliant piano tuner, as brilliant in his own way as John Kilbarron, the Irish Liszt. The pianist Brodie accompanies all over his tours from Paris to St. Petersburg, as essential to Kilbarron as the pianist's own hands. It is a luxurious life. On a level of success Brodie could hardly have dreamed growing up in a remote Scottish village in a household ruled by a tyrannical father. But Brodie would gladly give it all up for the love of Russian soprano Lika Bloom, beautiful, worldly, seductive, and consort to Kilbarron, and hence off-limits, at least at the start of the story. And though seemingly doomed from the start, Brodie's passion for her only grows as their lives become increasingly more intertwined, more secretive, and finally more dangerous. This was very good. It's a meat and potatoes novel, exactly like the kind that I talked about yesterday. This novelist has always struck me as having a bit of a weakness for the weeds. In almost every book that I have read by him. In fact, I don't know right now off the top of my head if I can think of an example that defies this rule. In virtually everything that I've read by him, you get to the end of Act 2 and the narrative wanders a bit, not productively. And then it wanders back. He never fails to deliver. He never fails you in the climax and the resolution. He's always present, and he's always at the top of his game from the middle of Act 4 to the end of Act 5. But there's always a bit of a wandering, and it happens in this book too. No matter how much this novel freights the plot more than a lot of his novels do. Some of his novels amount to what an old friend of mine, referring to a different author, a contemporary of Boyd's, referred to as a lovely dawdle, which is not praise. That is not what you want in a novel. And some of his novels amount to that. The plot of this, the action, the stuff going on, was more heavily freighted for a shot and incident than any novel of his that I can remember. And even so, there was a wandering. I don't know why that is, but I still recommend the book, because when it comes back to focus, it's fantastic. And the story, when it culminates, when it starts to pick up steam, which always happens after that wandering, is wonderful. And there's some really evocative stuff in here. There's a moment when Moncur worries for his own health, and it comes out of nowhere. I thought I'd read you a bit of it, just so you get a sense of what this author can do in the urgent register of his voice. It was a sensation of drowning, he thought later. Keep in mind, he's not thinking this at the time, it's just springing on him, as he felt his throat fill with fluid and then his mouth. His lips parted, and he sensed the gush of vomit burst out. Except it wasn't vomit. It was dark blood, splashing on his desk and the books ranked on the far side against the wall, like the breakwater against a blood tide, a break blood against. He stood and reeled back. Blood dripped from his chin onto the floor. He saw a slowly spreading puddle of his own blood pool on his desktop and ease over the sides, pattering. He staggered and fell to the ground, feeling another wave coming, cascading out of his mouth, this time wetting the floorboards and the square of carpet that lay there. A huge whooshing, uncontrolled surge. He was on all fours now, spitting, his mouth rank with the salty metal taste of his blood. Stay calm, he told himself. Some kind of brutal vomiting, an ulcer, something he'd eaten, poisoning his innards, rotting them. He spat again. Bloody hell, he sensed it had passed, this fit, this seizure. He clambered to his feet, using the back of his chair as support. So much blood. He was breathing fast, like a man who'd run a mile. He felt sweat pouring from him, his face slick, his armpits a swamp. Jesus, what's happening? He went to a wicker basket where they kept yards of cotton waste and threw the thick shreds of cloth on the floor and the... This is really going to be every video. Hello. Hello, baby. Sorry. That's really going to be every video. Unless I in this incredibly dramatic moment that's now ruined. He felt lightheaded, terrified. What if it happened again? He would go to it. Okay. That was the mail. This is just a disaster. I will come back to this.